I met him 15 years ago. I was told there was nothing left. No reason, no conscience, no understanding, and even the most rudimentary sense of life or death, of good or evil, right or wrong. I met this 6-year-old child with this blank, pale, emotionless face and the blackest eyes, the devil's eyes. I spent 8 years trying to reach him, and then another 7 trying to keep him locked up, because I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Locked in here with you. That's it! You're locked in here with me!
Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another edition of History Of. My name is Anthony from the Nights of Horror, and since Halloween was yesterday, I thought I would share the history of Michael Myers. Like always, if you've never seen the Halloween movies, pause this video and binge watch them now, and then come back to this video, because this video will contain spoilers. Still here? Alright, let's dive right into it. Michael Aubrey Myers is the central character and the main antagonist of the Halloween franchise. A 6-year-old child, Michael was admitted into a psychiatric hospital for the murder of his older sister, Judith Myers. After nearly 15 years of captivity, Myers broke out of the asylum and, for 23 years, hunts down the rest of his family to kill them. Although the 4 through 6 timeline and the H2O timeline both follow the events of Halloween 1 and 2, these killings occur at completely different dates. Michael Myers was born on October 19, 1957. He had an older sister named Judith and a younger sister. The family resided in a 2-story house at 45 Lambkin Lane in the suburban town of Haddonfield, Illinois. By 1963, when Michael was 6 years old, he claimed to have suffered from bizarre, inexplicable nightmares and heard a voice in his head that would tell him to do things. The voices tell me to say I hate people, says Michael. His dreams were filled with images of actual events that took place several centuries ago at the dawn of the Celtic Age. He dreamed of a disfigured 15-year-old boy named Edna who, after being rejected by his true love, Deirdre, brutally murdered her during the Feast of Samhain on what would later be called Halloween night. These versions would have a greater impact on Michael later in his life. On October 31st, 1963, Michael committed his first act of murder. His parents were away and he was home with his sister Judith, who was supposed to be babysitting him, but cared more about spending an intimate moment with her boyfriend, Danny. After Danny left, Michael, dressed in a clown costume, went into the kitchen, picked up a chef knife, walked up the steps, and stabbed Judith to death. He then quickly walked back downstairs and into the front yard, where he waited for his parents and the police to collect him. Michael was taken to Smith's Grove Sanitarium, where he became a patient of a psychiatrist named Dr. Sam Loomis. He spent 15 years with Dr. Loomis, barely moving, never speaking a word. On October 30th, 1978, Michael Myers destroyed his room at Smith's Grove and carved the word sister on his door before breaking out. He also released the other patients from their rooms. At the same time, Dr. Loomis and nurse Marion Chambers were arriving at the facility to transfer Myers for his court hearing. Noticing the patients roaming around outside the hospital, Loomis got out of the car to investigate as Michael attacked Marion and sped away in their station wagon. As he drove across Illinois, Michael stopped to murder a truck driver to steal his boiler suit. Traveling to Haddonfield, Michael returned to his childhood home. The next day on Halloween, a teenage Laurie Strode dropped off a key to the Myers house for her realtor father and was immediately recognized by her brother. Michael proceeded to stalk her and her friends Annie and Linda throughout the afternoon. He also stole Judith's gravestone from the local cemetery and broke into Nichols' hardware store to acquire knives, rope, and a Halloween mask. Meanwhile, Dr. Loomis had followed Michael to Haddonfield and warned the town sheriff, Leigh Brackett, at the danger he posed. That night, as Laurie and Annie were babysitting across the street from each other, Michael watched them from the shadows. He murdered Annie first, strangling her in her car as she left to meet her boyfriend, before slitting her throat. Later, Linda and her own boyfriend Bob showed up, only to fall victim to Michael as well. Worried about her missing friends, Lori crossed the street to investigate, only to find Annie's body arranged under Judith Miles' gravestone and Linda and Bob hidden in the closets. Michael lunged at his sister, catching her on the arm with his knife, and she ran for help. Michael followed her across the street, and Lori was forced to stab him with both a knitting needle and his own knife. As Michael rose to resume his attack on Lori, only to get his mask yanked off and giving her the chance to see his face, Dr. Loomis appeared and shot him 6 times, causing him to fall off the balcony. When Loomis went to check the body, Michael had vanished. The injured Michael fled into the back alleys of Haddonfield. He killed teenager Alice Martin before breaking into the elementary school and scrawling Sam Hain onto the chalkboard in blood. As the news of the murders spread, chaos erupted in Haddonfield, with citizens rioting and teenager Bennett Tramer being killed in the confusion. Learning Lori's location from a news report, Michael resumed his search for her at Haddonfield Memorial Hospital, where she had been taken for her shoulder wound. Michael systematically murdered Lori's protectors at the hospital, including a security guard, 2 paramedics, a doctor, and 4 nurses. Meanwhile, Dr. Loomis, who was continuing his search for Myers with the help of the Haddonfield police, was told by Marion Chambers of Michael's siblings' connection to Laurie Strode. Loomis, realizing why Michael had come home, tracked him down to the hospital and saved Laurie's life a second time. Loomis and Laurie worked together to cause an explosion in the hospital operating room, which engulfed Michael into flames. Michael suffered severe burns and was left in a coma. He was sent to Ridgemont Federal Sanitarium until October 30th, 1988, when he was arranged to transfer back to Smith's Grove. However, upon hearing that his sister Laurie Strode had died and her daughter Jamie Lloyd, his niece, lived in Haddonfield, he woke up from his coma and murdered those with him in the ambulance. After the vehicle crashed off a bridge, Michael escaped and began his journey back to Haddonfield. He stopped at Penny's gas station and murdered the employee, stealing new overalls from one of the mechanics. Meanwhile, Dr. Loomis, who had heard of Myers' escape and was tracking him once more, encountered him at a diner and begged him to leave the people of Haddonfield alone. Michael responded by driving off in the stolen truck, burning the station to the ground in the process, and leaving Loomis stranded. In Haddonfield, Jamie was suffering regular nightmares about her uncle. When taken shopping for Halloween costumes by her adoptive sister, Rachel Carruthers, she briefly saw him as he was stealing a new mask from the discount store. When Loomis finally arrived in town, he contacted new sheriff Ben Meeker with the news of Michael's return. The pair of them went out searching for Jamie, who was trick-or-treating with Rachel. Meanwhile, Michael had began his attack on Haddonfield, destroying the town's power supply and single-handedly wiping out the entire police force but Meeker and Deputy Logan. When word got around that Myers was back, a group of vengeful townsfolk began patrolling the streets with shotguns. Meeker and Loomis finally caught up with Jamie and Rachel, and they took refuge in Meeker's house. However, when Michael found a way in and began killing their protectors, the 2 girls escaped via the roof and were eventually rescued by the people hunting Myers. Jamie and Rachel were driven out of the town safely as the state police arrived to deal with Michael Myers. However, Michael had secretly hitched a ride under the truck, and Rachel was forced to take the wheel when he killed their driver. She drove erratically as Michael crawled at her from the roof, eventually throwing him off the roof and hitting him straight on. Jamie went over to check her uncle's body, and as he rose again, Meeker and the team of armed police showed up and shot him relentlessly until he fell down a nearby mine shaft. The police threw a stick of dynamite into the mine shaft to finish him off, but Michael crawled out just in time and was swept away by the river. When he finally escaped the current, he fell back into a coma and was discovered by a hermit who nursed him back to health. A year later, Michael awoke from his coma, killed the hermit, and continued searching for his niece. Jamie was now living at the Haddonfield Children's Clinic after stabbing her stepmother on Halloween, 1988. Michael's evil had somehow affected her, and she now shared some kind of psychic bond with her uncle. Knowing where and when he would strike next, Michael returned to Haddonfield and began stalking Rachel, sneaking into her house and stabbing her with a pair of scissors. When Rachel's friends Tina Williams and Samantha showed up looking for her, Michael followed them to the party at Tower Farm. Jamie, however, sensed that Tina was in danger and escaped the clinic to look for her friend. At the party, Michael murdered Samantha and her boyfriend in the barn while they were having sex. Just as Tina found the bodies of her friends and the police officers sent to protect, Jamie showed up at the farm and Michael chased them through the fields in his car. Tina sacrificed herself to save Jamie shortly before Loomis and the Haddonfield police arrived. Loomis told Michael, who was lurking in the woods, to meet him at the Myers house. Loomis and Sheriff Meeker arranged a sting operation to trap Michael at his childhood home using Jamie as bait. Michael, however, was not falling for the trick and murdered the staff of the children's clinic to distract the police, ignoring Loomis's attempt to reason with him. Michael killed the remaining police officers and began chasing Jamie to derelict Myers' house. She eventually ran upstairs to the attic, where she then discovered a child's coffin laid out ready for her. With nowhere left to run, Jamie climbed into the coffin, and as Michael raised his knife, asked her uncle to show her his face. In a bizarre moment of humanity, Michael removed his mask and began crying, but when Jamie tried to wipe his tears, he recoiled in a rage. He followed Jamie downstairs, where Loomis shot him with tranquilizers before finally beating him unconscious with a plank of wood. Michael was taken into custody at the Haddonfield police station, and Meeker was made preparation for him to be transferred to a maximum security facility. However, a mysterious person in black enters the building and machine-gunned every officer in the building before disappearing with both Michael and Jamie. Residents of Haddonfield believed that Jamie and Michael died in the explosion at the police station in 1989. In fact, the mysterious man in black had taken them and had hid him away in an unknown building, and now had impregnated Jamie. On October 30th, 1995, Jamie gave birth to a boy and escaped the sanitarium with the help of a sympathetic midwife. After calling a radio station to alert Dr. Loomis that Michael was after her, Jamie hid her baby at a bus station and fled back to Haddonfield. When Michael forced her off the road, Jamie took refuge in a barn, where Michael found and impaled her on a corn thresher. As the bleeding Jamie told him he could not have her baby, Michael switched to the machinery and watched as his niece was gutted. He then returned to Jamie's vehicle in search of the infant to find that he was not there. Meanwhile, a new family had recently moved into the Myers house, relatives of the couple who adopted Laurie Strode. The youngest, Danny Strode, was hearing voices telling him to kill, much like Michael had as a child. Across the street, Tommy Doyle lived in a boarding house owned by Mrs. Blankenship and was obsessed with Michael Myers. After hearing Jamie's cry for help over the radio, Tommy tracked the call to the bus station and discovered the baby, who he named Stephen. He then runs into Dr. Loomis at the Haddonfield Memorial Hospital and warns the Strode family that they were in danger. True to Loomis's warnings, Michael returned to his house and murdered the Strodes in search of Jamie's baby, leaving only Danny and his mother, Kara, alive. Kara and Danny were taken in by Tommy, who explained to them his theories that Michael Myers, who was cursed by a runic symbol called Thorn by a cult of people who had worshipped it. The man in black is later revealed to be Dr. Terrence Wynn, Dr. Loomis's longtime friend and former colleague. He and his group of people who appear to be a cult of Thorn arrived at the boarding house to retrieve Stephen, as well as Danny, Kara, and Michael, in the process leaving Tommy and Loomis drugged. When they awoke, Tommy and Loomis tracked the cult down to the Smiths Grove Sanitarium. As Loomis confronted Wynn about his role in all of this, Wynn congratulated Loomis on being the first to recognize the unique power of Michael's evil. Wynn wanted to exploit his power and invited Loomis to join him. Meanwhile, Tommy snuck into the maximum security ward to rescue Kara and the children. They encountered Michael Myers wandering the halls of the asylum and witnessed him butchering several members, Dr. Wynn's staff, and possibly Dr. Wynn himself, while working on a genetic engineering experiment, possibly involving Danny. Michael then continued his search for Jamie's baby, only to be pumped full of drugs and beaten unconscious with a pipe by Tommy. As Tommy, Kara, and the children prepared to leave Smiths Grove for safety, Dr. Loomis decided to stay to attend to some business. Back inside the building, Michael's mask is seen on the floor and Dr. Loomis is heard screaming in the background, leaving the fate of both characters unknown. Michael Myers' body was never found. Although many simply assumed him dead, Dr. Loomis continued to track Myers' possible movements until he passed away in the mid-90s. While Laurie Strode faked her death in a car accident in case her brother ever came after her again, Michael was in fact still alive and decided that Halloween 1998 would be the night for a family reunion with Laurie because it would also be the 17th birthday of Laurie's son, John Tate. On October 30th, he broke into the Langdon home of Marion Whittington Chambers to uncover more information on his believed dead sister. Marion came home to discover the break-in and was aided by her neighbors Jimmy Howell and Tony Alger. Michael murdered the teenagers and Marion himself before escaping with files regarding Laurie Strode. Police speculated that Michael Myers may have been responsible for the killings and made a call to Haddonfield to be on the alert. Michael tracked Lori, now known as Carrie Tate, in Hillcrest Academy, a boarding school in Summer Glen, California, where she had worked as headmistress. Her son and Michael's nephew, John Tate, was also a student at the school. As Carrie struggled with the 20-year-old memories of her brother, and John grew increasingly impatient with her paranoia and overprotectiveness, Michael snuck into the school grounds and stalked his family on Halloween. Carrie allowed John to go on a school trip to the Yosemite, but unbeknownst to her, he and his friends had planned a Halloween party in the empty school. Michael murdered John's friends Charlie and Sarah before attacking John and his girlfriend Molly. The two teenagers managed to feud him off long enough for Lori and her boyfriend Will to come to the rescue. Michael murdered Will, and upon getting John and Molly to safety, Carrie decided to stop running and face her brother. She re-entered the school and confronted him head-on, stabbing him multiple times and pushing him off a balcony. Myers laid unconscious, but Lori was prevented from finishing him off by Ronald Jones, the school security guard, who dragged her away from her brother's body. As the police arrived in Hillcrest, Michael awoke and attacked the paramedic who was about to move his body. He crushed the man's larynx, rendering him mute and unconscious, and switched clothes with him. Meanwhile, outside, Carrie was unconvinced that her brother was dead and proceeded to steal what she thought was the body and drive off with him in the coroner's van. As the confused paramedic regained consciousness in the back of the van, Carrie deliberately crashed the vehicle, sending them both down a hill and trapping the man underneath the van. She prepared to finish off Michael Myers once and for all, and after pausing momentarily when the masked man showed a glimpse of humanity, mercilessly chopped off his head with an axe. As all of this went on, the real Michael Myers slipped off into the woods. After killing an innocent man, the guilt-stricken Carrie Tate had been arrested and sent to Grace Anderson Sanitarium, where she returned to be called Lori. She was believed to be a catatonic state by the nurses, but was secretly preparing for her brother's inevitable return. Michael finally appeared on Halloween 2001, killing 2 security guards to get to his sister. Lori lured him onto the roof of the institution where he had become caught in the trap she had laid for him. Michael dangled over the edge of the roof, and Lori mockingly told him she was no longer afraid of him. As she was prepared to cut his rope, Michael, with confusion, grabbing at his mask, much like the paramedic she had killed. Unable to risk another innocent life, Lori hesitated and attempted to remove Michael's mask to be sure. Michael took advantage of this indecision, grabbing his sister and stabbing her in the back. Lori defied her brother one last time before falling off the roof to her death. Michael framed an inmate at the sanitarium, Harold Trumbull, for the murders by giving him his blood-stained knife. Michael eventually returned to Haddonfield and lived in the sewers under 45 Lambkin Lane. In 2002, however, his childhood home was invaded by an entrepreneur named Freddie Harris, who had planned to host an internet reality show in the legendary Myers house. The show was entitled Dangertainment, involved a group of college students from Haddonfield University spending Halloween night 2002 locked inside the house to look for answers as to what drove Michael Myers to murder. Unbeknownst to the participants, Harris rigged the house with false evidence that Michael had been physically and psychologically abused as a child. He also dressed up in Myers' iconic mask and overalls to give him an impersonation that the boogeyman had returned. However, during the show's live broadcast, the real Michael Myers began murdering the youths on camera, leaving only Freddie and Sarah Moyer alive. As Michael was about to kill Sarah, Freddie, wounded, arrives and electrifies Myers, and the house went up in flames with Myers inside. Michael's charred body was recovered and taken to the morgue when he regained consciousness. Over the course of the films, Michael has killed a confirmed total of 81 people. If one counts his debatable killings, then he has claimed 85 lives. If his animal victims count, then he also has 85 confirmed victims. All considered, he took the lives of 89 living creatures. Michael Myers possesses superhuman strength, stealth, endurance, and durability of an unknown limit. He has been known to be able to lift a large tombstone out of a grave and carry it for long distances by hand, penetrate an adult human skull with his thumb easily, lift and hold aloft an adult human male with only one arm effortlessly, and impale an adult human male through a solid wooden door with a blunt object, among other feats. He is shown to be adept at sneaking up on his unsuspecting victims from hiding spaces and in open spaces without making any noise or attracting any attention. He can withstand critical injuries that would normally result in death, such as being shot multiple times in vital organs, brain and heart included, deep stab wounds and or impalement, high voltage electrocution, or severe third-degree burns over most of the body mass. He may have a healing factor that would enable him to regenerate tissue and even whole organs, such as skin and eyes. It is possible that the fire or decapitation could kill him. Since the H2O timeline ignores the curse of Thorn and the cult, his ability to withstand injuries is never really explained. His superhuman abilities could be granted to him by the magical nature of the curse of Thorn, as the cult members assert the evil never dies. But this remains unconfirmed. However, it is supported by Samuel Loomis when he states that hell would not accept Michael, meaning that Michael Myers can't die or enter the afterlife. And that, my friends, is the entire history of Michael Myers. Thank you for continuing to support me. If you like this video, make sure to hit that thumbs up button. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe as I put up new content every week. Thanks for watching, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll see you in the next one.